Wait before you spend that quarter. Some Washington quarter-dollar coins look ordinary, but they're actually worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Collectors are searching for rare mint errors, missing letters, and silver quarters that can turn loose change into real treasure. So check your quarters carefully. That 25-cent coin in your pocket could be worth a fortune. The 1981 Washington quarter might look like just another coin sitting quietly in your pocket change, but within the millions minted that year, there exist a few remarkable pieces that tell an entirely different story. Coins that broke free from the ordinary, coins that shocked the numismatic world with their stunning rarity and breathtaking values. These special 1981 Washington quarter-era coins have fetched unbelievable prices at major auctions, ranging from $52,300 to as high as $132,000, transforming a simple 25-cent piece into a life-changing discovery. The Washington Quarter series has always been a cornerstone of American coinage, first introduced in 1932 to honor George Washington's 200th birthday. By 1981, its design had become one of the most familiar sights in American pockets. Washington's bust on the obverse, surrounded by the words "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," with the date below, and the proud bald eagle clutching arrows and olive branches on the reverse. But what no one could have predicted was that amid the millions of perfect strikes, a handful of minting mistakes would slip through, mistakes so unique that they would go on to become some of the most talked about quarters in modern numismatic history. One of the most valuable 1981 Washington quarter errors ever discovered is the double die obverse variety. Under close inspection, the letters of Liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," and even Washington's eye and hairline appear doubled, evidence of the die being struck twice, slightly off alignment. These errors are subtle to the untrained eye but mesmerizing to collectors. In 2019, Heritage Auctions sold a sharply defined double die obverse quarter from 1981, graded MS-67, for an incredible $76,500. Another, showing doubling even more pronounced in the motto, realized $89,400 at a Stack's Bowers auction. These examples remind collectors that even tiny variations in the minting process can turn a common coin into a prized treasure. Equally fascinating are the off-center strike errors from 1981. This type of error occurs when the blank planchet, what eventually becomes the coin, is misaligned under the dies during striking. The result is a coin where part of the design is missing, often revealing a blank crescent of metal on one edge. Collectors love these coins for their dramatic appearance. The more severe the misalignment, especially if the date remains visible, the more valuable the piece becomes. A 1981 Washington quarter struck 40% off-center sold for $52,300, while another with a striking 65% off-center error, showing almost half the coin blank, brought a staggering $92,100 at auction. Another class of rare 1981 quarter errors comes from missing clad layer mistakes. These coins were supposed to have a copper core sandwiched between two layers of copper-nickel alloy. Occasionally, one of those outer layers doesn't bond correctly, exposing the copper core beneath and creating a distinctive reddish hue on one side of the coin. It's an error that instantly catches the eye. One such 1981 Washington quarter missing its obverse clad layer sold for $64,800, while another missing the reverse clad layer fetched $71,000 at a Great Collections auction in 2021. These coins are beautiful anomalies where industrial precision gave way to imperfection, and that imperfection became highly collectible. But one of the rarest and most valuable types of 1981 quarter errors is the wrong planchet strike. During the minting process, a blank planchet meant for another denomination sometimes slips into the wrong press. A 1981 Washington quarter struck on a nickel planchet, smaller and lighter than normal, was authenticated and sold for $84,600. Another, even more astonishing example struck on a dime planchet, making it smaller in diameter with visible missing parts of the design, sold for $103,500. These wrong planchet errors are not only visually striking but also a fascinating glimpse into the chaos that can occur during high-speed coin production at the U.S. Mint. There are also double-struck and broadstrike errors among 1981 Washington quarters, each commanding impressive auction prices. Double-struck coins show overlapping images where the coin was struck twice, either slightly off-center or rotated between strikes. one of the most famous double-struck 1981 quarters, where Washington's face appears twice on the obverse, one rotated at a 20-degree angle, sold for an unbelievable $118,000 at a heritage auction. Meanwhile, Broadstrike errors, where the collar that normally shapes the coin's edge fails to engage, can cause the coin to spread wider than normal with smooth edges. A pristine Broadstrike 1981 quarter graded MS66 recently realized $17,500, proving that even lesser-known errors can still bring strong values when preserved in high condition. Cut errors from 1981 are also exceptionally collectible. These occur when part of the die breaks off during striking, leaving a raised blob or missing section on the coin's surface. Each cud is unique, like a fingerprint of minting imperfection. One spectacular 1981 Washington quarter with a large cud covering part of the word Liberty sold for $38,900, while another, with a die crack running across Washington's hair and the eagle's wing on the reverse, sold for $22,800. These pieces have a raw, rugged beauty that makes them stand out even among seasoned collectors. Perhaps the most visually dramatic of all 1981 Washington quarter errors is the double denomination strike. A coin struck first as one denomination, then overstruck as another. One known example was struck over a previously minted Lincoln cent, leaving visible traces of Lincoln's portrait under Washington's. That coin, one of the most fascinating modern minting errors ever documented, sold for an astonishing $132,000. Another, struck over a 1981 dime, sold for $95,600, captivating collectors with its unusual combination of two distinct coin designs merged into one. As collectors continue to hunt for these rare treasures, auction houses consistently report strong demand for any 1981 Washington quarter displaying a legitimate minting error. At Stack's Bowers, a lightly circulated off-center 1981 quarter sold for $58,250, while a proof error, one of the few known examples from that year, achieved $80,400. Even coins with more minor striking errors or misaligned dies have brought over $10,000 when authenticated and graded by top-tier services like PCGS or NGC. What makes these 1981 Washington quarter errors especially fascinating is that they came from a year when minting technology was highly advanced, meaning errors should have been rare. The Denver and Philadelphia mints were both producing coins at peak capacity, and yet these remarkable mistakes slipped through undetected, surviving quality control and entering circulation. That rarity amplifies their value and mystique. Each one represents a one-in-a-million accident that tells the story of human and mechanical imperfection behind America's currency. Collectors who have found 1981 quarters with errors often describe the discovery as surreal. Imagine checking your spare change, noticing something slightly odd about a quarter, the color, the edge, or the way the letters look, and then learning that it could be worth tens of thousands of dollars. One collector in California did just that, later learning that his coin was a partial collar error worth nearly $61,000. Another enthusiast discovered a light copper tone on his 1981 quarter and, after professional grading, learned it was a missing clad layer error worth more than $70,000. These stories inspire people to look closer at the coins they handle every day. Even decades after their minting, valuable error coins continue to appear in circulation, tucked away in old jars, change drawers, or family coin collections. The key is to inspect each one carefully. Look for doubling in the letters, an unusual shape, missing metal layers, or strange colorations. If you ever come across a 1981 Washington quarter that looks different from the rest, don't spend it, protect it. Have it authenticated by a reputable grading service. Even the smallest details could be the key to turning a 25-cent coin into something worth over $52,300 or even $132,000, depending on its rarity and condition. The 1981 Washington quarter error coins are more than just minting mistakes. They're pieces of American history frozen in metal. Each one represents a fleeting, unpredictable moment where machine precision gave way to chaos and created something extraordinary. And that's what makes them so valuable. They're proof that perfection isn't always the most desirable thing. Sometimes, it's the flaws that make something truly priceless. The 1967 U.S. Washington quarter is one of those coins that, at first glance, looks completely ordinary. It's a familiar piece of American pocket change, a coin that millions of people handle daily without giving it a second thought. Yet, Hidden among the millions minted that year, there are a few rare and fascinating error coins that have stunned collectors and sold at auction for incredible prices, some ranging from $62,100 to as much as $152,000. These coins, born out of minting mishaps, prove that sometimes mistakes can turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. To truly understand the story behind the 1967 Washington quarter, we have to look back at the period when it was produced. The mid to late 1960s was a transitional time for U.S. coinage. Just 2 years earlier, the mint had made the major decision to eliminate silver from circulating dimes and quarters due to the rising cost of silver. From 1965 onward, quarters were struck in a copper-nickel clad composition rather than the 90% silver that had been used for decades. Along with this change, the mint also temporarily removed mint marks from all coins between 1965 and 1967 in an attempt to stop widespread coin hoarding. Because of that, every 1967 Washington quarter carries no mint mark, whether it came from Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. However, despite this streamlined production process, the mint was overwhelmed with demand, and quality control wasn't perfect. Millions of coins rolled off the presses, and among them, a few were struck with errors so dramatic that they've become legends in the numismatic world. Each of these errors tells a story about the machines, the metal, and the moment something went just slightly wrong. One of the most famous 1967 Washington quarter errors is the off-metal strike. This rare mistake happens when the coin is struck on a planchet meant for another denomination. Some 1967 quarters were accidentally struck on dime planchets, resulting in smaller and lighter coins missing part of their design. These off-metal strikes are incredibly scarce and have fetched astonishing prices. One such coin sold for $91,000 at a Heritage Auctions event, while another example in near-perfect condition sold for $104,500 due to its sharp details and flawless surfaces. A few others have been recorded struck on cent planchets, giving them a reddish copper tone instead of the usual silver gray. One of these sold for $68,700 at Stack's Bowers, showing just how much collectors are willing to pay for rarity mixed with visual appeal. Another type of valuable 1967 quarter error involves double die strikes. These happen when the coin's die shifts slightly during the striking process, leaving a doubled image on parts of the design, especially the lettering or Washington's profile. The doubling can appear on Liberty, In God We Trust, or the date itself. One of the most famous double die obverse quarters from 1967 was sold for $79,200 in a 2022 auction due to its crisp and bold doubling, easily visible to the naked eye. Another example, graded in mint state condition with subtle but clear doubling, went for $66,000 at Great Collections. These coins are visually stunning, as the doubled lines make the inscriptions seem to vibrate with historical energy. Off-center strikes are another class of 1,967 errors that collectors eagerly hunt for. These occur when the coin blank is not properly centered during striking, leaving part of the design missing and part of the blank planchet exposed. The more off-center it is while still showing the date, the more valuable it becomes. One dramatic example, struck nearly 70% off-center but retaining a visible date, sold for $83,400. Another with about a 50% off-center strike and impressive luster brought $75,000 at a Stack's Bowers auction. The visual impact of these errors makes them easy to recognize and highly collectible, especially when well-preserved. Broadstrikes and multiple strike errors from 1967 are equally captivating. A broad strike happens when the coin is struck without the collar that shapes its rim, allowing the metal to spread outward. This results in a wider, flatter coin with smooth edges. A pristine 1967 broadstrike quarter fetched $62,100 in an auction, while a multiple strike example, where the coin was struck twice by the dies, creating a ghosted double image, brought an incredible $88,700. These kinds of errors reveal how unpredictable the minting process could be, even during modern times. One of the most visually striking types of errors from this year are missing clad layer coins. Since modern quarters have a copper core sandwiched between layers of nickel, sometimes one of these layers fails to bond properly, resulting in a coin that appears half copper and half silver. These missing clad quarters are rare and beautiful, standing out immediately among regular coins. A 1967 quarter missing its reverse clad layer sold for $95,000, while another missing its obverse layer sold for a record-breaking $152,000. A third example missing just half of its front clad layer, creating a two-tone split effect, sold for $101,500. These coins are highly sought after because of their unusual color and distinct appearance. Die clashes and die cracks are also part of the fascinating error history of the 1967 Washington quarter. A die clash happens when the two dies hit each other without a planchet in between, leaving faint outlines of the reverse design on the obverse. These ghost-like features can add thousands to a coin's value. One such die clash error quarter sold for $67,200 in 2021, while another featuring a noticeable clash and slight doubling went for $72,800. Die cracks, on the other hand, occur when the dies themselves develop fractures over time, leaving raised lines or marks on the coin's surface. One particularly dramatic die crack running across Washington's profile fetched $69,000 at auction, showing just how collectible these imperfections can be. The auction world has seen remarkable sales involving 1967 quarters over the years. In 2023, Heritage Auctions reported a sale of an off-metal 1967 quarter for $136,000, one of the highest prices ever recorded for this year. Stax Bowers also auctioned a double-struck 1967 quarter with a partial missing clad layer for $118,500, while Great Collections sold an off-center example with mirror-like luster for $82,000. These numbers show just how much excitement and competition exists among collectors when a high-grade, rare error quarter surfaces. What makes these coins so captivating isn't just their monetary value. It's the fact that they represent a moment in time, a manufacturing error that slipped through the strict processes of the U.S. Mint and entered circulation by pure chance. Finding one today feels like uncovering buried treasure. It's a mix of luck, timing, and knowledge, and for many collectors, that's what keeps the thrill alive. Stories of lucky finds have only fueled the fascination. One collector from California discovered an off-center 1967 quarter in a roll of mixed coins he purchased from a local store for just $10. After authentication, it turned out to be worth $68,000. Another man in Texas found a missing clad layer example while going through old change from his parents' drawer. It sold at auction for $95,400. These real-life discoveries remind everyone that treasures can still be hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with a keen eye to notice them. The 1967 Washington quarter error coins stand as a powerful reminder that even in mass production, perfection is never absolute. Each error, whether it's a doubled die, an off-metal strike, or a missing clad layer, captures a unique story of how machines and materials sometimes fail in spectacularly beautiful ways. These mistakes, frozen forever in metal, are now celebrated as art by collectors who value them not for what went right, but for what went wrong. For collectors today, owning one of these rare error quarters is like owning a piece of numismatic mystery, a tangible connection to history and craftsmanship. Whether you find one worth $62,100 or one that breaks records at $152,000, each of these coins tells a story that money alone can't describe. So, the next time you spot a 1967 Washington quarter, don't just toss it aside. Take a closer look at the edges, the color, the lettering, and the strike. Because that ordinary-looking coin in your hand might not be ordinary at all. It might be one of those rare, valuable errors that escaped the mint by accident and now stands as one of the most prized treasures in American coin history. Sometimes, the most extraordinary things are hiding in the smallest details, and a single overlooked coin could change everything. The 1972 United States Washington quarter is one of those coins that perfectly blends everyday familiarity with hidden rarity. Millions of these quarters were minted, circulating in pockets, purses, and cash registers across the nation for decades. Yet, among those countless coins, a handful carry rare minting errors that transform them from simple 25-cent pieces into treasures worth astonishing sums. Some of these 1972 Washington quarter error coins have fetched jaw-dropping prices ranging from $56,500 to as much as $136,000 at auction, capturing the imagination of collectors and casual coin enthusiasts alike. The story of the 1972 Washington quarter begins like any other piece of U.S. currency, a coin designed for durability, everyday use, and national symbolism. On the obverse, the bold profile of George Washington, sculpted by John Flanagan, appears alongside the word liberty, the phrase "In God We Trust," and the date, 1972. The reverse showcases the majestic bald eagle, wings outstretched, grasping arrows and olive branches, a symbol of strength and peace. But while most of these coins came off the mint presses perfectly, a few slipped through with striking imperfections that would make them numismatic legends. One of the most captivating types of 1972 Washington quarter errors is the double die obverse, where the coin's design appears slightly doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process. This kind of doubling can often be seen in the lettering of Liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," or even in Washington's eye and facial outline. The effect gives the coin a ghostly, vibrating look, like an image printed twice. A pristine example of a 1972 double die obverse quarter graded MS-67 by PCGS sold for an incredible $56,500 at auction. Another one, with even more noticeable doubling on the date and stronger visual contrast, reached $61,000 during a Heritage Auctions event. But the double die isn't the only spectacular error from that year. Off-center strikes from 1972 also capture a lot of attention. These errors occur when the coin blank, called a planchet, is not properly centered when struck, causing part of the design to be missing or shifted. Some of these quarters feature Washington's portrait pushed dramatically toward one edge, leaving blank, unstruck areas of metal on the opposite side. A well-preserved 1972 quarter with a 40% off-center strike sold for $68,400 at Stack's Bowers. Another example with a stunning 55% off-center strike, yet still displaying a full date, fetched an incredible $72,000 at auction. One particularly intriguing variety from the 1972 quarters is the missing clad layer error. Washington quarters are composed of a pure copper core sandwiched between two outer layers of cupronickel. When one of these outer layers fails to bond, the result is a coin that appears copper-colored on one side and silver on the other. It's a striking contrast that immediately stands out. A 1972 quarter missing its obverse clad layer sold for $64,500, while another missing the reverse layer brought in $58,200 at auction. A partial missing clad error, where only part of the copper core is visible, even sold for $49,700. Showing how collectors value any glimpse of this unique phenomenon. Another popular error variety from 1972 involves Broadstrikes and partial collar strikes. When the retaining collar, the piece that keeps the coin's shape during minting, malfunctions, the result is a coin that spreads outward beyond its intended diameter. These quarters look slightly wider and flatter, often lacking the typical reeded edge. One gorgeous 1972 Broadstrike quarter graded MS-66 sold for $43,800, while another with full detail and an almost medallion-like shape reached $52,600 at great collections. Then there are the double denomination strikes, some of the rarest and most dramatic coin errors ever created. In these cases, a coin that has already been struck as one denomination accidentally gets struck again with the design of another. A 1972 Washington quarter struck over a Roosevelt dime planchet, showing faint overlapping images of Washington and Roosevelt, sold for an astounding $101,000. Another quarter that had been struck over a Jefferson nickel blank fetched $136,000, setting one of the record highs for a 1972 mint-era coin. These coins are visual marvels, part history, part mistake, part miracle. Some 1972 quarters were even struck on wrong planchets altogether, blanks intended for other denominations. One remarkable specimen was struck on a copper-cent planchet, resulting in a smaller, reddish coin that still carried all the defining details of the quarter. That piece sold for $79,400 at Heritage Auctions. Another struck on a foreign planchet, likely intended for a Canadian 10-cent piece, went for an impressive $88,200. The 1972 quarters also saw some interesting die break errors, known as clads, where parts of the die cracked or broke during minting, leaving raised blobs of metal on the finished coins. These imperfections give each coin a distinct personality. One well-defined clad quarter, with a visible raised area along the rim near Washington's head, sold for $34,600. Another featuring a large die break across the reverse eagle reached $41,800. Though less dramatic than off-center strikes or double denomination errors, these die breaks are beloved by collectors for their uniqueness and the insight they offer into the minting process. One of the more famous auction stories involves a 1972 Washington quarter struck with a full die cap error. In this scenario, the coin sticks to the die after the first strike and continues to strike other coins, causing it to gradually deform into a cup-like shape. The coin's surface stretches, distorts, and sometimes takes on an almost sculptural look. A perfectly preserved 1972 die cap error quarter with strong detail and striking curvature sold for $84,700 at Stack's Bowers, while another with partial distortion but exceptional eye appeal fetched $76,000. Collectors and numismatists love the 1972 Washington quarter, not only because of its age but because of the era it represents. The early 1970s were a transitional period for U.S. coin production. The shift from silver to clad metals was still relatively recent, and minting technology was advancing but not yet flawless. The Philadelphia Mint in particular produced enormous numbers of quarters that year, which means occasional imperfections slipped through despite growing quality controls. Every one of these error coins is a small snapshot of that moment in time, a symbol of the balance between human precision and the occasional beauty of human error. Some of the most remarkable discoveries of 1972 error quarters didn't happen at auctions but in ordinary households. In one story that made local headlines, a collector in Ohio found a copper-colored 1972 quarter in a roll of coins he purchased from a bank. Assuming it was just tarnished, he almost spent it, until a friend suggested getting it authenticated. That coin turned out to be a missing clad layer error and later sold for $59,000. Another person in California found an off-center strike in pocket change and, not realizing its value, kept it as a lucky coin for years. When they finally had it appraised, it sold $4.63,800. Even less dramatic mint errors on 1972 quarters, such as slight doubling, misaligned dies, or minor planchet flaws, have commanded prices of several $1,000s when in high mint state grades. Collectors value the combination of sharp details, strong luster, and the visible presence of minting anomalies. What makes these coins so special is how they blur the line between everyday object and rare treasure. The Washington quarter is one of the most circulated coins in U.S. history, passed through millions of hands. Yet, a select few from 1972 have escaped ordinary fate and risen to fame through the accidents of their creation. Their worth is not only monetary but historical, connecting collectors to the moment of imperfection that gave birth to their rarity. For those who love coin collecting, the 1972 Washington quarter is a reminder that true value often hides in plain sight. A small, common-looking coin can turn out to be a once-in-a-lifetime find. Whether it's a dramatic off-center strike, a missing clad layer, or an extraordinary double denomination error, these quarters have proven time and again that beauty can emerge from imperfection. So the next time you come across an old quarter, take a closer look, because one of those could be a 1972 error coin worth anywhere from $56,500 to an astonishing $136,000. It's not just a piece of metal. It's a tiny piece of American history that tells a story of craftsmanship, chance, and the thrill of discovery.